Thank you. At the outset, I would like to thank Prashant for making me a part of this course. And I would be talking to you about surgical management of microbial keratitis, when and how. I have no financial interest in any of the products which I mentioned in the presentation. And the surgical management as such for microbial keratitis consists of the intracameral and intrastromal injections, conjunctival flaps and amniotic membrane transplantation, which is more for herpetic ulcers, Tenon's patch graft, which we have described, which Professor Vajpayee has described, which will be showing, glue application, tectonic patch grafts, therapeutic deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty, and therapeutic penetrating keratoplasty. Now, because of the limitations of the currently available antifungal agents, and such as those of availability of the commercial preparations, limited penetration and toxicity, the interest has been generated in intracameral and intracorneal injections for fungal keratitis. Intracameral antifungal agents are indicated in cases of proven fungal keratitis not responsive to medical therapy with thick hypopion, endothelial exudates and deep anterior chamber exudates, and two drugs have been tried, amphotericin B 5 to 7.5 micrograms and voriconazole 50 to 100 micrograms per 0.1 ml. This is the technique of intracameral voriconazole injection. Anterior chamber paracentesis is done, and this is followed first by mechanically washing of the exudates, and this is followed by the injection of the drug, which is taken in a tuberculin syringe, which is loaded onto the cannula. These are the various case reports, anecdotal case reports and case series which have shown that intracameral injections do work. Out of 40 cases which have been reported in literature, they healed in all but 4 cases. And these are 2 cases where intracameral amphotericin B was given, another case where large amount of hypopion is present and amphotericin B helped to cure the infection. However, it is associated with side effects, and most important is anterior chamber inflammation, which occurs more with amphotericin B than with voriconazole, which lasts for about 24 to 48 hours. Patient may complain of pain, there may be presence of cataract, and theoretically, although no case has been reported, there could be secondary infection or endophthalmitis. Intrastromal or intracorneal injections are again indicated in cases of proven deep fungal keratitis. The ulcer should be non-perforated, and they should not be responsive to conventional, topical and systemic antifungal therapy for at least 4 weeks. Again, there should be severe ulcers and recalcitrant ulcers. And these are the various case reports and case series which have been which are present in literature, which support the use of intrastromal or intracorneal injections. However, there are no randomized controlled trials, so we cannot compare it with a conventional therapy and say that they really work. These were the first 3 cases that we actually treated at our center, and in the first case we saw a dramatic response, and so we were encouraged to use it subsequently. And this is the technique of intrastromal voriconazole injection on a 26 gauge needle. The drug is loaded in the tuberculin syringe, and just like in a phaco wound, hydration is formed, and this is done in multiple meridians, in 4 to 5 meridians around the abscess, in such a manner that you form a barrage around this abscess, just like as one does in a panretinal photocoagulation. Important thing is that you have to go through the area of non-thinning more into the clearer area, so that you do not cause a perforation. Sometimes, especially in cases of post-LASIK keratitis, you may have to amputate the flap, and it may have to be done partially, as in this case where there was an infiltrate present and spindle of the flap was removed, and subsequently healing occurred, and the patient had a visual acuity of 624. Now, there may be times when you may have to completely amputate the flap, as in this case, buttonhole flap with Staph aureus keratitis. Patient, after amputation of the flap, had a best corrected visual acuity of 6/60. Conjunctival flaps are indicated more for herpes ulcers, so I would skip this. And much of the things that I would be talking to you about are already given in 2 publications, one in Current Opinions in Ophthalmology and the other in Survey of Ophthalmology, which came last month. Coming to the glue application, the indications are corneal thinning and melts due to microbial keratitis, and the perforation should be small, that is less than 2 millimeters, and it can be also done in cases of desmetocele. Two types of glues are available, the synthetic cyanocrylate glue and the biological fibrin glue. And there are two methods of application of glue. One is the drop method and the other is the disc method. And in this I would be highlighting the disc method, which I generally use. The glue is loaded in the tuberculin syringe, and drapes are actually punched with the help of the dermatology punches, which are 2 to 3 millimeters. This is the xylocaine jelly, and this is the back of the swab stick. You take some amount of xylocaine jelly, and with the help of that, you actually take the pieces of the drapes which you have previously punched and put some amount of glue on this, and then onto the ulcer of the patient who's seated on a slit lamp. And 2 or 3 contiguous such patches could be put, and this is followed by the application of a bandage contact lens, and this then causes subsequent healing. Amniotic membrane transplantation can also be done in small perforations without active infection, and this could be single or multi-layered, and again with sutures or with glue. And this is a multi-layered amniotic membrane transplantation where already a piece has been sutured onto the defect, followed by a larger piece which is then sutured with the help of the vicryl suture. Now, patch grafts are best for small corneal perforations that are not amenable to corneal gluing, and in these cases even donor cornea which is not suitable for optical grafts can be used. However, if the perforation is central, then you may have to do a central penetrating keratoplasty. And these are the cases of patch grafts. Coming to therapeutic keratoplasty, full thickness graft is indicated in cases where you have microbial keratitis which is not responsive to medical therapy, in cases of impending perforation or perforation, and in cases of desmetocele. And the goals are primarily resolution of infection and restoring the integrity of the globe, and the visual rehabilitation is a secondary aim in these cases. Also, it prevents the involvement of the adjacent sclera and decreases the risk of endophthalmitis. Now, apart from a routine workup of a corneal ulcer, it is very important to do posterior segment evaluation in these cases by ultrasonography to rule out endophthalmitis. If you have a good quality donor tissue, it is preferable and ideal to use that, because healthy endothelium maintains a clear graft. It allows post-op assessment of the anterior segment, and intact epithelium reduces the chances of reinfection. However, if a good quality donor material is not available, then one can use non-optical grade tissue, and glycerin or cryopreserved corneas may be used, and optical graft can be done later. Appropriate systemic and topical antimicrobials should be used in these cases, and you may have to, we prefer to do it under general anesthesia and ensure hypotony, akinesia and anesthesia to avoid positive vitreous pressure. Now, you may have to do additional intraocular surgical procedures such as synucleolysis, peripheral iridectomies, pupilloplasty. As much as possible, try to preserve the crystalline lens. However, if you cannot, then you may have to do cataract extraction. An intracameral wash with the vancomycin or amphotericin B or voriconazole may be done depending upon the type of microbial keratitis. Now, this is an example of post-epilastic keratitis, 21 years female who had the organism identified was Pseudomonas aeruginosa. She was PL plus, PR inaccurate in 3 quadrants with impending perforation, and the organism was resistant to all antibiotics except to meropenem. And by the time patient was taken 24 hours later for a therapeutic penetrating keratoplasty, the cornea had melted. The principles of therapeutic penetrating keratoplasty are that you have to encompass the area of microbial keratitis as well as 0.5 to 1 millimeter of the clear area. This is followed by the debulking of the infected part, the debulking of the cornea, as well as removing the infected part. Now, this steps helps to debulk decrease the microbial load, so that subsequently when you put the graft, the antibiotics, they prevent the recurrence of any infection. Now, after this has been removed, one should always one should inspect the anterior segment. For instance, in this there was fibrinous membrane present, and very gently this is then removed from the underlying iris tissue and separated. Unfortunately, the lens in this case was clear, but if it is cataractus, then one can remove that also. A large graft, this is followed by the wash, which was given by vancomycin in this case, and an oversized graft of 1 millimeter is then used, and interrupted sutures should be used in these cases and not continuous sutures, because healing in these cases is rapid and you may have suture infiltrate, so you may have to replace the suture or treat appropriately. Now this was the case which I showed you, and post-operatively at 6 weeks had a best corrected visual acuity of 4/60. The graft is not clear and the patient is awaiting optical penetrating keratoplasty. But sometimes when you use a good quality donor tissue, then you can have a clear graft such as this. We have described a technique of penetrating keratoplasty for perforated corneal ulcers, preservation of iris tissue by corneal debulking, and in this it is sequential removal of the corneal layers from the underlying iris which takes place, and the steps of this are given in this article. Now, this was a case of another example, a case of infectious crystalline keratopathy due to alternaria, which despite medical therapy went into thinning and perforation, and we had to do a therapeutic penetrating keratoplasty. Post-operative guidelines are given beautifully in a chapter which was written by Dr. Prashant Garg in corneal surgery book, Bright Bill's book, and much of it has been taken from there. In cases of bacterial keratitis, one should always give systemic antibiotics 2 weeks post-operatively, along with the topical antibiotics which should be given 1 hourly, and steroids can be initiated under antibiotic cover. In cases of fungal keratitis, the systemic antibiotic should be given for 2 weeks. If there's a perforation, hypopion or limbal scleral involvement, then for 6 to 8 weeks. And topical antibiotics should be tapered over 8 to 12 weeks. If no recurrence, and epithelialization is complete. Now, topical steroids in case of fungal keratitis should be withheld for 1 to 3 weeks, should be given in low concentration and low dose, and if there is no recurrence or residual infection, and epithelialization is complete. In all these cases, systemic steroid should be given only when it is severe. In Acanthamoeba keratitis, intensive multi-drug therapy should be given for several weeks, and steroids have to be used with caution, but if it is associated with scleritis, it can be given. Acanthamoeba keratitis generally tends to have a poor prognosis because almost most of the cases would have recurrence. It is better to wait and do optical keratoplasty in these cases at a later date. Now, post-operative complications could be there within 2 weeks, which could be wound gape, shallow AC, persistent uveitis, synechia, secondary glaucoma, persistent epithelial defect, and reinfection, and late, which could be cataract, glaucoma, graft infection, rejection, graft failure, ectasia, and thysis bulbi. And one has to look for all of these in the post-operative period. Now, coming to another topic which has recently emerged is lamellar grafts in suppurative keratitis. The advantages are that there are less chances of rejection and graft failure. The recipient endothelium is preserved. There are less chances of intraocular complications such as cataract, secondary glaucoma, and end-off. And the donor quality criteria is less stringent. But even when you do lamellar grafts, in cases of microbial keratitis, you should have a good quality tissue because the chances of perforation are high. However, the disadvantages are that there would be incomplete eradication because of the presence of the microscopic foci. Recurrence of infection can occur. Intralamellar vascularization can be there. Optical clarity is compromised due to interface, and technically this is a difficult surgery. Lamellar grafts in suppurative keratitis are indicated again in active and progressive microbial keratitis which are not responsive to medical therapy. Infection has not yet progressed to endothelium, and even in cases of desmatoceles. And I would be wary to do it in fungus keratitis because fungus tends to penetrate deep. Otherwise, in other microbial keratitis, it can be undertaken. However, in cases of perforation and large ulcer with excessive thinning, limbal or scleral extension, it should not be done. It has been done by glycerine preserved eyes, but suboptimal grade tissue can be used for this. And there are two techniques, or rather three techniques by which it can be done. The Anwar big bubble technique, which should be avoided in deeper lesions because the high pressure due to big bubble may cause forceful descemet membrane perforation. I am more comfortable doing manual layer by layer lamellar dissection for non-responding microbial keratitis or viscoelastic assisted DLK in desmetoceles. Now this is a case of microbial keratitis where deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty is being done. There is a infiltrate which is present and desmetocele. It is imperative to do AC paracentesis in these cases first so that the descemet's membrane falls back, and with the help of the viscoelastic agent one can separate the stromal layers from the descemet's membrane. It is quite easy to separate it because this is a pathological tissue which is hydrated, and so the separation has already occurred pathologically. So you just have to aid it a little bit using viscoelastic agent, and the first lamella of the tissue is removed, taking care not to disturb the descemet's membrane area. Less amount of tissue now remains, and then it becomes easier to remove this layer from above the descemet's membrane, and this helps in after the first debulking, the subsequent removal of the stromal layers is then easily done. This is followed by the, you can see the descemet's membrane which is then exposed, and a full thickness graft from where the endothelium has been removed is then taken. The endothelium is being removed after staining it with a trypan blue dye, and this is then sutured onto the bed. Now this is the surgical technique of DLK and desmetoceles which we described, and this is the video of the same. In this, initially in all cases one should make a trephine mark. It is just a mark, we are not doing any trephination because you do not want to perforate the descemet's membrane or cause raised intraocular pressure which can cause stress on the descemet's membrane. Having done this, the descemet's membrane is separated from the overlying stromal layers with the help of the viscoelastic, and then a keyhole is made so that the stromal layers which are present above are dissected, and you can see the clear descemet's membrane beneath. Again, like I emphasized earlier, it is not so difficult to do therapeutic deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty as it is to do optical DLK, because the pathology helps you as the layers are hydrated. Again, this is the full thickness donor from which the descemet's membrane is removed, which is then sutured onto the bed with interrupted sutures. We do see some amount of edema in the donor as well as in the recipient when you do a therapeutic DLK, with over a period of time, however, clears up. And there could be complications of recurrence, epithelial problems, endophthalmitis, and descemet's detachment. And this is to show that DLK can fail in some of the cases, such as this. This case was a case of infectious crystalline keratopathy, in which deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty was done. However, this is the first DLK. Recurrence occurred in the DLK graft, so we had to do a therapeutic keratoplasty. Two infiltrates were seen in this therapeutic graft, which subsequently perforated. We tried to glue it, and when we were doing, in fact, this was done at Shroff Center, the last surgery. The patient went to the to a private hospital, and when the lens was, when the therapeutic keratoplasty was being done, at this point in time, the lens expulsed out, and the patient became aphakic with the secondary glaucoma, and the best corrected visual acuity is 618. And this is the case which we nearly referred to Prashant after we couldn't handle it. So to conclude, various therapeutic modalities are available for microbial keratitis, but they should be used according to the stage and severity of the disease, and appropriate and timely intervention may control the infection and may provide patient optimal visual rehabilitation. Thank you for your attention.